The markings on the pavement say slow, but I'm with something that is definitively not. This is the fastest Kia ever made. It is all electric and it is a hatchback. This is Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and this is the 2023 Kia EV6 GT. The Kia EV6 in general is the brand's newest electric car. It is on that eGMP platform that's shared with the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Genesis GV60. Now, this is the one that I'm most excited for between the three because frankly, it's the one I like the looks of the most. But let's talk all about what the EV6 GT is, what Kia does to make it be the GT, because it is not just a trim level, it is actually a higher performance variant of the vehicle. And then we'll of course talk all about how it is to drive. All right, so first of all, what is the 2023 Kia EV6 GT? Well, like I said, this is the highest performance version of the EV6, and that's a car that came out several months ago, if not a full year. I really don't remember, but in any case, the GT came out a little bit later, and it's a little confusing because there's also a GT line as a trim level. Now, that one is not going to be as fast. That's kind of a regular EV6 with like some visual doodadery going on to make it look a little sportier. This one is actually different. Performance-wise, it is much different. It is up a substantial amount. It makes 576 horsepower, which is a ton of horsepower, and it makes 545 pound-feet of torque. Now, the torque figure is up a little bit over the regular EV6 dual motor, but the horsepower bump is fairly substantial. It's 200-something horsepower more than a regular EV6. Now, Kia didn't just turn up the wattage or the juice and call it a day. That's not quite how this all works. What they actually did is they took the rear motor from a regular EV6 and put it on the front axle of the EV6 GT, and then they took a more powerful motor that you can't get on a regular EV6 and put that on the back axle here. So these are all-wheel drive, as you would expect, two motors, but you're going to have a slight rear bias in how this car drives, given it's a more powerful back motor. Talk a little bit more about that in the driving portion. There's also a surprise drift mode that messes with the stability control and how the motors output power and all that good stuff and lets you actually drift this car, so they say. Now, power-wise, like I said, all-wheel drive goes to all four wheels through those two motors. It is helped by an ELSD, an electronically controlled limited slip differential on the back axle. That is, surprise, surprise, going to be helpful for this drift mode, but it's also helpful if you're trying to put power down because this car, you know, is just a motor on each axle. There's no transfer case in the center, given how EVs work. And what this means is that if you've got slippery situations or performance driving situations where one of your two back wheels is going to be on a lower traction sort of surface, whether you're kind of just got weight transfer through a corner or say you've got some rain or some snow or some ice, the ELSD is going to make sure that both back wheels can get some power and put power down and keep you moving forward. That's very important both in bad weather and in performance driving. Kia also retunes the GT to have quicker steering going on. They stiffen the chassis a little bit, and then you've got a set of adaptive dampers that will get softer or firmer based on the drive mode that you choose. And those, of course, are going to be tuned a little bit differently than you would get on a regular EV6. And then, of course, you have to stop the whole thing, and Kia has gone with some bigger brake rotors on both the front and rear axles. The regular EV6 is like a 12.6, 12.7-inch rotor going on. You've got a 15-inch rotor up front and a 14.2-inch rotor at the back, so that is nice. You've got a larger swept area for the pad to clear, and that means you will get more stopping power, and it will also help with heat dissipation, which is nice because this, as with every other electric car, is heavy, and this is a little heavier than a regular EV6 just for a variety of reasons. All these little bits that they do add some weight. Now, you'll notice up here there is a lime green brake caliper going on. That applies to all the brake calipers and throughout the rest of the car on the interior. The lime green is the color that Kia chose for the GT trim level. I think it is fabulous. It's fun. It's different. Usually you get, you know, red. You might get kind of a gold like Polestar uses. So having a neon green I think is just so fun, so different. Gives the car a little bit more personality. So those are the mechanical bits of this car, but we have to talk about the range and the battery because I wanted to put more miles on this car than I actually did in my time with it. And so we have to talk about the range of this car and the battery of this car and all of the different things that people care about with EVs, because EVs are new and fun and scary and people don't think they can go anywhere with them. And in a lot of cases, I would say that's not true. In the case of this car, I would say it's going to present a few more challenges than you might think. So the EPA rates every EV, much like they do every internal combustion powered car, for a range and an economy number, much like a fuel economy number. And that is, of course, based on, ideal situations, ideal cases. So perfect weather, perfect speed, easy acceleration to achieve that best economy, not what a lot of us do in the real world, which is to say 10 over the speed limit everywhere, AC or heat cranked, 4 people in the car, full load of cargo, the dog, whatever. In the real world, things are often a little different than what the EPA ratings turn out to be. So with that in mind, the EPA rating of this car is 206 miles. That is not a huge amount of range, and here's why that matters. If you're driving in the city, of course, most people don't drive more than like 40 miles in a day. That's kind of the commonly cited statistic. However, I wanted to take this car on a road trip to see 2 of our lovely Out Motorsports members get married in Lexington, Kentucky, which is 550 miles, give or take, from where I live in Washington, D.C. Now, 200 miles of range, you'd say, okay, well, you stop and charge a couple times, no big deal. Well, for one, the infrastructure, when you get away from the coasts, the infrastructure for EV charging is still kind of hit or miss. And in this case, with the route I was going to take, it was totally miss. So there weren't a lot of stations in the first place. That is not Kia's fault. However, they kept the same battery pack as in the regular EV6 long range, which is to say you've got 77 kilowatt hours of usable battery juice going on in the floor here. And of course, they added a little bit more weight to the car versus a regular EV6, like I mentioned, and that I don't think is really a big deal. I think where the biggest problem comes in is actually with the wheels and tires. So Kia actually limits how much power the car puts out in most of the drive modes. You don't get all 576 horsepower unless you're in the full GT drive mode, but these wheels and tires don't change based on your drive mode. They're what Kia gives you. They look, proportionate to the car, but keep in mind, I always see these and the Ioniq 5 on the road and think, oh, they're like a Volkswagen GTI in size. They're not. They're much bigger. They're very spacious inside. They're very comfortable inside, but the wheels are 21-inch wheels with a Goodyear Eagle F1 summer tire on them, which is to say, this is not a low rolling resistance hybrid and EV sort of tire. This is a high performance summer tire that is often found on sports cars. So that is going to impact your range. A regular EV6, not a GT, is rated for up to like 320 miles of range if you've got the proper trim level with that long range battery. And in this case, using that same battery with all of the GT bits, you're just gonna get a lot less range. Now, the other problem that comes with that is when I'm talking about doing a road trip, you can charge to 100% when you're at home. You can wait for that extra charge. That is all fine and good. However, all the statistics for charging speed, talk about, oh, well, whatever to 80% charge. And that is because with any EV, not just a Kia, the charging curve, how fast the car charges, drops off after 80%. That's done to protect the battery and deal with cooling and all this thermal management. So 80% is kind of your realistic limit, especially if you're road tripping. You just want to plug in, get back juiced up, and get back on the road like you would with any other vehicle. But 80% of 206 miles is 163 miles, if my bad math is correct. So 163 miles then is what you're going to get in the perfect world, in ideal driving conditions, on a perfect day. In my case, we had higher speed limits than I would normally find on the East Coast. It was a hot weekend, so we had the AC running. We just had a lot going on here that I think is not typical for the EPA test cycle. So I don't think we would have even gotten 160 miles out of it. So that, combined with less infrastructure where I was going, meant that this car literally would not have made it very easily to Lexington, Kentucky. I did plug in my intended route to a better route planner, which is the EV route planning app that will tell you where you can stop. The fastest chargers it could find were all kind of along the route. It found some at car dealerships and things that would do like 50 kilowatts of charging speed, which is not nearly fast enough for this car. These cars are on that 800 volt architecture that they call eGMP. They support up to about 240, 250 kilowatts of charging speed with the right chargers. But if the charger can't output that, you're not going to get that. A better route planner said that it was going to add 3 hours to my drive if I wanted to take this car. It was doable, but it was going to add 3 hours on top of an 8.5 hour journey. So I just left the car parked and drove my own car instead, which really bums me out because I want to talk all about how this thing drives. It's very fun, it's very spacious. I think we would have been able to have 3 people in it as we did in relative comfort, and it would have been a nice highway partner. But 206 miles, you know, at 100% battery charge is really, I think, a tough sell when you consider the price of this car. This is fully loaded. There's really kind of one way to do it, which, as you see here, and this is just shy of $63,000, which is a lot of money for any car, doubly so if this is a car that is not easily driven on long road trips if you're a person that does that. If you live in the city and you don't go more than, you know, an hour or so away from home, then sure, something like this could work for you, but I really think this kind of mileage, this kind of range on a perfect drive cycle is just not quite enough for a car like this, especially at this price. This is not a little city car. This is meant to be your only car. This is meant to be your family car, your road trip, or your whatever. So the range is kind of the letdown here. But there's a lot to talk about as far as how this drives. I think there's a lot that's good and fun, so let's get into that next. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do with the EV6 GT driving experience is talk about the acceleration, because like I said, you have to be in that full GT drive mode, and then when you do, put your foot in it. That is very quick. Gives you 0 to 60 in like 3 point something seconds. I don't know how much it even matters. It's very fast. And then as you get into it, like I said, it feels rear biased, and it does. It absolutely is going to want to like push the tail around a little bit, and you can feel it. It's really entertaining, but it's also controllable. And that sound you heard was not the tires scrabbling for grip. It's actually just a sound that they pipe in through the speakers. So it is, of course, quite fast. It is very, very, very fun, but you know, quick acceleration to me is a party trick, right? Like, everybody can do that, but when you're living with things in the real world, you want something that is better than just a car that can go 0 to 60 very quickly. So all that to say, we have a lot more to talk about. So in the GT mode, you've got your dampers turned all the way up, you've got the steering getting a little bit heavier, the power delivery gets a little bit more rear biased from what I can tell, and it's all fairly good. I like the car and how it rides. I like how it handles. The steering, I think, is fairly accurate. There's a decent amount of feel for what it is. You feel the car's weight to a point, but it's not, you know, sloppy. There's good body control going on. So that, I think, is really nice. Now, the dampers are pretty stiff in this, you know, highest drive mode setting, so you can get out of the GT mode and go back to my mode or to one of the other modes, you know, eco or normal or whatever, and it will, like I said, cut the power down a little bit, but it also softens everything up. It is still, you can see, it's plenty quick, and not really worried about the speed or the torque or anything there. It all feels pretty nice still, but makes the car a little bit more livable in day-to-day situations. So you're not gonna be cruising down the interstate in the GT mode, but it's just a nice button on the steering wheel here if you want it for some quick bursts of maximum acceleration. It's interesting, if you're steady on the throttle and hit it, the car will markedly pick up as far as how quickly it can accelerate. So kind of an interesting little touch. The other thing I didn't mention before that you get inside the EV6 GT is some unique front seats. These are a little more sculpted. They're supposed to be a sport seat, and I think they're okay, but I don't love them. They're good for lateral support. You've got nice thick bolsters, especially for your torso. They're a little bit wider for your thighs, so you know, even if you're a little bit bigger from the waist down, you'll be comfortable. I think if you're a bigger person really than I am, you might find these side bolsters to be a little restrictive, so something to think about. I also think they could use a little bit more lumbar support and a little bit more thigh support. The thigh cushions are fairly long, but I would like a touch more, but really the lumbar is what I find the most lacking. So that to me is just something that they could slightly improve on. Would it deter me from buying the car? I don't think so. I think the seats are fine enough. Now, interior-wise, you know, these are, like I said, on that eGMP platform, and they've got the Ioniq 5 and they've got the Genesis GV60 as part of the trio, because all the companies are, you know, related and familial in some way. And I think this is the one I like the most, and it's because of how the interior is laid out. So the others feel very, very wide, and this feels the sportiest and the most just kind of like regular car to me. It's not trying to be something that it's not. It's just kind of, you know, very comfortable feeling and I feel more like there's a little bit of a cocoon going on here for the driver and the passenger. The dashboard is angled a touch toward me, but the passenger can still mess with this center infotainment screen if they need to. Then you've got the other screen here for your gauges and whatever else, and you can see a whole bunch of different stuff depending on your drive modes. I've got one more opportunity for acceleration. I might as well go back to GT here. Wait for some traffic to clear. And there's no real launch control. You don't really need it, you just floor it. So just like this. Now when you do that, that was with steering input dialed in. I'm going a little bit to the right. You can hear a little bit of tire noise as it kind of scrabbles and figures out where the power is going to go. You can feel it a little bit in the wheel. It's got an open diff in the front, but you know, it wants to pull just a touch, but nothing too concerning. It just kind of adds a little bit of personality to the car. It's not bad. It's just something to be aware of. So I think it's a very entertaining car. The range is really the thing that kind of kills it for me. Like I said, it's just makes it very impractical as an only car or a road trippy sort of vehicle. As far as other stuff going on inside the cabin and driving experience beyond the seats, I think the visibility is very good. You've got a nice low dashboard, you've got fairly low door sills. The screens, despite being fairly large, are also out of the way, which I think is great. You do have this kind of dual use touch panel for both audio and infotainment and defrost and then climate controls. It's clever. I think it works well enough because there's some easy ways to just get to key climate control controls. So I don't dislike it, although it being touch sensitive, again, I kind of hate because I hate all things touching cars. I think it's generally not very safe. But speaking of safety, there's plenty of safety gear going on in this car. Full driver assistance suite of technology. So you've got that excellent highway driving assist like every other Kia and Hyundai and Genesis product has. It is, I think, still one of the best on the market. It is not true hands-free. There are no self-driving cars on the market today, but there are some others that let you do hands-free level 2, notably GM Super Cruise and Ford Blue Cruise. This is not quite that, but it does do a very good job. You do have some hard buttons going on here with the center console. It's a nice center console, and then you've got plenty of room between the front seats as well. The one thing I dislike is that Apple CarPlay on this car is hardwired, and that is okay. I don't mind it because, again, on a road trip, you know, it keeps your phone charged, and even around town, you get better sound quality if you listen to proper lossless audio versus just, you know, crappy Spotify. So it's all kind of a win-win. However, there is a USB-C port and a USB-A port going on, and only the USB-A port works for the sake of CarPlay. So it means you have to make sure you have the right cable in the car. And in my case right now, I don't, so I'm just not using CarPlay. There is a wireless charger here. I think wireless charging is great as a quick little thing. It's a nice option to have, but I really hate relying on it. But it's nice that it is right here, and it can support a very large phone because phones, much like screens in cars, are getting so large to the point of being a little unusable and silly. Now, as far as other usable space, other large things, if you take a look in the back seat, there's plenty of room back there. It's a very, very, very spacious back seat, and you've got a flat floor. There's no hump, of course. There's no need for a hump back there. So that is really fantastic. And then you do have some good cargo space behind the second row of seats. Now, the one thing you don't have is much of a frunk. That is okay. Again, I don't really care because, you know, it keeps the hood nice and low. Everything's packaged up there, and then you get a decent amount of cargo space in the back. So, could there be some more space up front? Sure, but it's kind of the same with the Ioniq 5 and the GV60. You don't get a ton up there, and I really just don't mind it all that much. So overall, I think this is a fairly fun car. With EVs, you know, it's tough to differentiate a lot of things because you know, there's only so much you can do because they're all very fast, and if you close your eyes, which you shouldn't do while you're driving, they all kind of feel the same. So it comes down to steering and ride quality and interiors and styling and all that. And I really like what Kia's done here overall. I think, you know, like I said, the body control is very good. The ride is generally very good, even with those giant heavy wheels and those sticky tires. Even when you're in comfort mode, the ride is really, really nice. So I appreciate that. The big brakes, you know, all the stuff they've done to make this thing perform, it does a nice job of that, and it can go dual duty and be just kind of a comfortable commuter as well if that's what you need it to be. So I really just think the hard sell here personally is the range, but otherwise this is a really cool car. This is a nice car, and I love the fact that they didn't just turn up the power and call it a day. They went for real performance, they went for real hardware, and unlike some competitors, I'm really thinking of the Mach-E GT, which is often cited as having a bit of a too firm ride in particular in its, you know, turned up setting. I really think this is a little bit more balanced and a little bit you know, better sorted in its GT mode. So I do appreciate the fact that, you know, that's what they've got going on here. All right, that is it for this review of the 2023 Kia EV6 GT. As always, thank you so much for coming along. Please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. We are past that 10,000 subscriber mark now. Thank you so much for all of that support. If you'd like to follow us elsewhere, we can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. Give us a follow all over there on those channels, and you can head over to outmotorsports.com. We've got a whole community over there, both online and in person, who would love to meet you at one of our Zoom meetings, one of our Discord chat threads, or at one of our events in person around the country. So until next time, please stay safe, be well, see you again soon.